Hey everyone, welcome back to Corporate Decoder, the place where we dive deep into the money stories of big companies. Today we're looking at Verde Resources Incorporated, also known as VRDR. And let me tell you, their latest report is quite the ride. If you want to know how a company pivots from old businesses to a green revolution, and if it is actually working, stick around. And if you love getting these kinds of decoded insights every week, make sure you are subscribed. We also have a Discord community linked in the description below if you want to join the conversation. Verde Resources is pitching itself as a cutting-edge company focused on sustainable building materials, particularly for roads. They're talking about biochar, which is like charcoal made from organic waste, and how it can make asphalt better for the environment by pulling carbon out of the air. Think of it as making roads part of the solution to climate change. They've got this whole Verde net zero blueprint, and they even got the world's first carbon removal credit for asphalt production. That sounds pretty groundbreaking, right? They've also had some good news from the National Centre for Asphalt Technology, which is like a stamp of approval for their materials, showing they're not just good for the planet, but also strong and durable. Now, before we get too impressed, let's see how the numbers actually stack up. We've got their financial report, and like any good investigation, we need to look at the cold, hard facts. First off, revenue for the year ending the 30th of June 2025. They brought in about $133,000. That is up from about $97,000 the year before, so a decent jump, almost 38%. They say this is because they're selling more of their higher margin biochar asphalt premix, which is good. More sales and higher profit margins on those sales is a great sign. But hold on, let's look at what they're spending. They're selling general and administrative expenses, which is basically all the costs to run the company besides making the product, shot up by over 100%. Yes, you heard that right. It jumped from about $2.9 million to almost $5.9 million. A big chunk of that went to a special bonus for their chief executive officer, Jack Wong, recognizing his role in changing the company's direction. There were also increases in consultancy fees, partly due to share-based payments for non-employees and professional fees for getting ready to list on a bigger stock exchange, like NASDAQ. All these expenses, particularly that big jump in administrative costs, mean their net loss before taxes also grew. For the year ending the 30th of June 2025, their loss was about $4.8 million compared to about $3.2 million the year before. So while revenue is growing, the company is still losing more money. It is like they're trying to outrun their expenses with that revenue increase. But the expenses are winning right now. Let's check their cash situation. They ended the 30th of June 2025 with a little over $1 million in cash. That is quite an improvement from around $280,000 the year before. This increased cash likely comes from money they raised by selling their stock, not from their operations. They used about $3.4 million in cash for day-to-day operations, which is more than the $2.1 million they used the previous year, so they are burning through cash to keep the lights on and develop this new business. A big chunk of the company's stock, about 26%, is owned by a company called BW Capital Ventures LLC, and who owns BW Capital Ventures LLC? It is their own CEO, Jack Wong, and their co-O, Eric Barber. This means a significant portion of the company's ownership is concentrated within its top leadership. It is not necessarily bad, but it is worth noting. In fact, Jack Wong and Eric Barber together own about 70% of BW Capital Ventures LLC, which in turn owns over 26% of Verde Resources. Looking at the ownership structure, Jack Wong personally owns about 5.2 million shares, plus his stake in BW Capital Ventures. Eric Barber owns about 670,000 shares directly, plus his stake in BW Capital Ventures together. Just these two top executives, through their direct and indirect ownership, hold a considerable amount of the company's stock. Another significant owner is Borneo Oil Bearhead, holding about 13% of the shares. This name pops up a few times in their related party disclosures, suggesting a past connection or ongoing business relationship. They also settled a debt with Borneo Oil Corporation SDN BHD, which is part of the Borneo Oil Bearhead Group, by issuing them a lot of shares. This indicates a close link that investors should definitely keep an eye on. Now, let's talk about their main strategy for making money licensing their technology. They've struck a big deal with Ergen Asphalt and Emulsions Incorporated, a major player in the asphalt world. This deal, signed in October 2025, gives Ergen exclusive rights to use Verde's special asphalt ingredient in the United States, Canada, and Mexico. In return, Ergen will buy this ingredient from Verde. This is huge because it means Verde doesn't have to build factories themselves. They can rely on Ergen's existing setup, which is what they call an asset-light model. This can help them grow faster without spending a ton of money up front. However, there is a catch right now. Ergon doesn't have to buy a minimum amount of Verde's product, and minimums won't be decided until 2027. This means their revenue from this deal is uncertain in the short term. Digging into the financials, we see they had a promissory note to a related party, Borneo Oil Corporation SDNBHD, for about $675,000. According to the notes, they settled this by issuing a lot of their stock. This is a common way for companies at this stage to manage debt without using precious cash. They also have other smaller amounts due to and from related parties, which is typical when you have close ties to key shareholders and partners. Let's look at risks. They have a lot of what they call intangible assets, mainly their technologies, valued at over $33 million. Auditors are keeping a close eye on these because it is hard to put an exact price on intellectual property. They have to do special checks to make sure these aren't overvalued if the value of these technologies goes down seriously. It could hurt the company's financial picture. A major risk they highlight is their reliance on these third-party licensees like Ergon. If Ergon or any future partners don't perform well, or if Verde loses them, it could seriously damage the company. Right now, their success is almost entirely tied to this one big deal with Ergon. That is a lot of eggs in one basket. And for investors, here is a heads up. Their stock is considered a penny stock. This means there are extra rules that make it harder for brokers to sell it and for people to buy it, and it can affect how easily you can sell your shares later. Penny stocks are also known for being super volatile and sometimes tied to shady practices. Though Verde says they are aware of these risks and will try to avoid them. Looking at executive pay, their CEO Jack Wong made about $1.6 million in 2025, mainly from his salary and a big bonus. Their coup Eric Bava and Chief Growth Officer Jeremy Kincannon also received substantial compensation, including significant amounts in company stock. This shows they're investing in their leadership, but it also adds to those rising expenses we saw earlier. So, what is the overall picture? Verde Resources is in a transition. They're betting big on a sustainable future for road construction, and they've made some impressive first steps, like getting that carbon credit and validating their technology. The revenue is growing, and they've secured more cash. However, they are still losing a lot of money, and their expenses, especially administrative ones, are rising fast. Their reliance on Ergon is a double-edged sword. It is a huge opportunity, but also a major risk if that deal doesn't pan out perfectly. The penny stock status also adds a layer of concern for potential investors. The biggest opportunity, their Verde Net Zero blueprint, is also one of their biggest challenges. If they can successfully scale this licensing model and monetize those carbon credits, they could be onto something huge. But there is a long way to go, and a lot could go wrong. They're relying heavily on their key people and these strategic partnerships. Looking at this report, Verde Resources is a company pushing for innovation in a big traditional industry. They've got the vision and the early traction, but the path to profitability is still very much uphill. They need their partnerships to deliver, their expenses to stabilize, and they need to prove that this green approach can be a solid business. Alright. That is our breakdown of Verde Resources' latest filing. What is your take on these numbers and what they signal for the company's future? Do you think their green strategy is a winner or just a lot of hype? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. If you found this analysis valuable, hitting that like button really helps us out, and subscribe for more deep dives into corporate finance. And don't forget to check out the Discord link in the description to join our community. Thanks for watching, and see you next time on Corporate Decoder.